Thanks for coming. As you can tell by the documentary, Broken Saints is a bit of a passion of mine. My history was in the video game industry. Hi, I'm Brooke Burgess. The formal part of the introduction is now done. I moved out to Vancouver to the West Coast from Ontario, back in 1993. And like everyone else who moves to the West Coast from the central part of Canada, we all want to be writers and actors and directors. That's what we hope to do. So I moved out there, and it's slim pickings. You're all working for American Productions anyway. You'll get bit parts. You'll get to write maybe one episode of The Outer Limits or X-Files or something. It's the best you can do. But I lucked out because I met a man who was there during the revolution in the video games industry. In the late 70s and early 80s on the West Coast, when guys were making games by themselves and they were picked up by publishers. Sam Nelson, who made games for Atari, for Intellivision, for ColecoVision, for all those old school 1980s video game systems that some of us might remember. And he said, hey, he came into my video game store where I worked, and we started talking about storytelling and about passion, about the idea of communicating to people, to getting that emotional resonance through interactive media. And I thought, games have this potential, really could do it. And he's like, so you're gonna ask me for a freaking job or what? And I went, okay, who are you? And he's like, well, I currently I'm an executive producer at Electronic Arts Canada. The Madden football games, Need for Speed, FIFA Soccer, SSX, all that stuff. So I went for 3 years and worked on some games at EA. And it was fun, sure. It was hard work, and yeah, I made a fair chunk of change. But after 3 years in what I like to peg as the cubicle barnyard, I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't do it. I woke up every morning feeling obligated. I didn't know to what, but I just couldn't go to work anymore. It was 1999. Let's flash back for a second. It was 1999, the year when mainstream film gave a little punch in the nose to the general audience and said, hey, here's a little Matrix. Here's a little Fight Club. Here's a little American Beauty. And Being John Malkovich. Here were films that were challenging our notions of social structure on a macro and a micro level. And I was geared for this. This made me happy and passionate. And one day I was out on the deck at EA and I was smoking a cigarette, and I had this vision of myself standing on a mountaintop in a little white t-shirt looking over the ranges of New Zealand, because I was passionate about Lord of the Rings filming at the time. And I walked back inside and went into my boss's office and said, I can't do this anymore. And he goes, so you need a vacation? You need some time off? No, I need to go. I need to quit. So wait, we can give you a promotion. We can give you some more money. No, we can raise your stock options. No, we'll do anything you want. I'm like, let me go. And he did. I got the golden handshake. I cashed out my stocks. And I went for 6 months overseas to the South Pacific. I had some friends who lived in New Zealand, and like I said, I was passionate about Lord of the Rings at the time, one of my favorite books, trilogy of books, and I wanted to watch the filming. So I picked up all my stuff. I had never done the backpacking thing before, and I went to New Zealand, and I went to Australia, but the bulk of my trip was spent in Fiji. And not on the main island, not near Suva, where you hear all the news about the revolution and the indigenous peoples getting all angry about land ownership. No. There are over 300 islands in the Fijian chain. And when you can get out to the really small ones, you can still live a tribal lifestyle. And so for 2 months of my trip, I lived a tribal lifestyle. And it changed my life. And then my money ran out, and I had to come back. And I came back to Vancouver on the West Coast in complete culture shock, totally out of money, and I had to swallow my pride and accept a contract position writing for games yet again. But that was okay, because now I had a sense of purpose. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna write a book about a disaffected Gen Xer who wants to see what's spiritually wrong, politically wrong, what's socially wrong. Shit, Douglas Copeland's done that a couple of times. That's not original. That's not original at all. But I was lucky enough to run back into a young friend who used to come into my game store, Andrew West, the artist that you saw in the documentary. He used to be a young kid who came in, and we'd sit and talk about philosophy and life and everything else. He loved Japanese culture. He had been there for a few years in an exchange program. And he's like, hey, remember when we used to talk about maybe doing a comic together? I could draw, you could write it, we could self-publish. I'm like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Sure, sounds like fun. I can do that in my spare time, maybe get some of this artistic angst out. And then he said, well, I have this friend you might want to meet. His name's Ian Kirby. He actually lives a few houses down from you, where you're currently living. I'm like, and I've never met this kid? And he goes, no, he's my age, 19. And so I went to Ian's house. Now Ian, as Catherine said, Catherine from Switch Interactive, who helped us start Broken Saints, more on that in a little bit, Ian was self-taught in Adobe Premiere at 14 years old, self-taught in Maya at 15 years old. This kid knew his stuff. And at the time, just for fun, in his spare time after being hired as a creative director for a design firm at 18 years of age, in his spare time he was playing around with Flash. And he said, I met this kid, and he's like, oh, it's a really neat idea. I heard about your comic idea with Andrew. Well, maybe you'll want to look at this technology. And I hadn't seen much Flash since I left EA, just little bits. And he showed me the current state of Flash. A pretty impressive little program that anyone can pick up and use. Unfortunately, it was being used to, create animated coiling dog turds on the floor and people being beheaded and violence and stupidity and everything of the South Park ilk, which was okay if it had a message, but this stuff didn't. These were 2-minute cartoons about blood and pooping and sex and whatever else, right? Lowest common denominator, mildly entertaining, office cooler stuff. But I saw something. Here you had a medium that currently, or at that time, was trying to ape or mimic the traditional animation medium. Online entertainment was trying to be like TV or movies. You'd have a little window, but you try to tell this little animated story like Disney or like a Japanese anime. You had a little window, but you try to say, oh, we can have full-length movies in this little window of 2 hours with people talking and you're sitting there watching at your computer desk. It doesn't make sense. They wonder why part of the dot-com entertainment crash happened, because people don't want that form of entertainment. It's a different medium. You need to use it differently. What do people do online? They read news stories. They access information. Those things text. They look at pictures. They download images. Sure, most of it's porn, but they download images. And they listen to music. Right? Audio, text, pictures. Guess what Flash does really, really well? Audio, text, and pictures. And here I was, coming from a background where I was passionate about graphic literature, passionate about comic books. I had been weaned on stuff like the 1980s revolutionary works of Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns, Alan Moore's The Watchmen, and then later, thank goodness, Neil Gaiman's Sandman anthology. Powerful storytelling, award-winning storytelling that stirred my imagination and gave me passion and also gave me a bit of spiritual direction in its own way. The medium, at the time, before the release of movies like Spider-Man, was starting to die again. Comic shops were no longer cool. They were not the place to hang out. They were only the dominion of hardcore nerds. Sales were going down. Toys actually were making up for the loss in actual comic book sales in these specialty shops. And I kind of wanted to pay homage to a medium that I was passionate about. I wanted to do something with graphic literature. And here was a tool, here was Flash, that enabled you to go a step further, to do something in the medium that hadn't been done before. Stan Lee, one of the great fathers of comics, tried it with his company, a few years back, and hired 300 people, and there was a huge stock collapse, and it was horrific. It just did not work. What you needed to do was create not only a compelling story, but a compelling environment where people wanted to partake of said environment, a world that they would believe in, something that wasn't compromised. So that's where we get to the whole money issue. I know someone's going to ask me the question, because everywhere I go, someone asks me the question, how do you make money off of this? Huh? How do you make money? You don't got any banners on your site? You don't got any advertisers? You're paying your own bandwidth, right? So how do you make any money? I don't. And I have to honestly tell you, when I'm on my deathbed, when I'm staring infinity in the face, I'm not going to give a flying fuck about what car I drove, about what type of house I lived in, or how many chicks I banged. Okay? I'm going to care about some of the good I did before I died. And so that sense of obligation I had when I woke up in the morning suddenly became this very freeing thing. Yeah, I can take this stock money that I made from making drugs for kids, basically, which is what most games are. Some aren't. I see the potential for the medium, but most are. Okay, keep them distracted. Here's a kill simulator. Kill, 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 kill. You wonder why 10-year-olds can walk into a school and head track. Why cops go, oh my God, right? That's what games can do. I wanted to take this medium and do something positive. And sure, I didn't think anything would happen with it, to be dead honest with you. I thought, oh yeah, I'm full of piss and vinegar right now. I'm full of it, and I'm going to convince some people to come along for the ride. I got these 2 young kids. Everyone's calling me Svengali. That's okay. And then I got to meet Catherine Winkler, the matriarch of Switch Interactive, a little design firm in Vancouver. And I pitched it, and she was like, wow, this would be a great portfolio piece for us. I really believe in its philosophical message. Go for it. And they supported us for the first 6 chapters. After that, it just blossomed. It mushroomed. It ballooned. We won awards. We got noticed in major publications like Entertainment Weekly, Hollywood Reporter, USA Today, and people started coming to the site in droves, just out of curiosity. Well, as you know, the double-edged sword of internet popularity is that the more popular you get and the more files and data that gets downloaded from your site, the more it costs you. You have to go through a middleman, a service provider. And we were doing upwards of 10 gigs a day at $10 a gig. Ourselves. We were paying for that out of our own pockets after we said goodbye to Switch Interactive. We had to leave because they wanted to focus on commercial projects, and we saw this groundswell of support for the project, and I knew that I could not forgive myself when I was on said deathbed if I didn't finish this, because the story was in there and it was burning a hole in me. So since then, let's see, we moved away from Switch in May of 2001 and continued on our own in Ian Kirby's basement. His parents have been very kind, providing us with tea and snacks, and basically letting us take over the entire basement to do this. And it's been a wonderful arrangement as we continue to get more and more popular and reach more and more people. Now that's great, but now sometimes we're doing 25 or 30 gigs a day. That's a lot of information, that's a lot of money, and eventually we had to swallow our pride because we were dirt poor and living on one thing of ramen noodles a day. Pardon the stereotype, but it's true. We were starving artists. We actually started asking for donations from our fans. Not in your face, hey, hey, hey. We wouldn't allow for the advertising. We didn't want our stuff to be co-opted because films now, TV now, books now, anything that has a large media machine behind it, it taints what you're making. The medium has been affected by the commercialism of it. And everyone thinks, oh yeah, banner ads on sites, that's how you make money. Or, hey, subscription site, great. And sure, one hand says, if people have to pay for something, they'll find more value in it. But I honestly believe that if we could create something that was different, that was free, that was by donation if it moved people, it would affect them deeply over time. It seems to have done its job. We've received over $10,000 in donations from our fans, people that we've never met. Not just sending $5 through PayPal or a check in the mail, anywhere up to $500 from a stranger who just says, thanks, I don't want any thanks back. Here, just love what you're doing. Keep going, finish it. We've done a series of benefit concerts locally in Vancouver that have raised, again, over $8,000. Bands donating their time and their performances, fans coming in of the band's end of our site and donating their money. We have completed 20 chapters of Broken Saints, 8 hours of free material and storytelling that some people are saying is revolutionary. We have 4 chapters left, 2 hours of material before we finish, and when it's done, we can talk about that in a few minutes. Now what we have here is the Broken Saints story wheel, the clock that ties. It's a theme throughout the series, and if you watch the whole series, you'll see how everything in the site and everything in each chapter ties together in this slow to build but tightly woven story that builds in an exponential arc. Those are the stories that I've always loved. My biggest influences, another question I'm sure you'll ask, Twin Peaks, The Prisoner, Okay, I like episodic television that had a cliffhanger aspect to it. It was really compelling to me. That questioned technological structures, social structures, spiritual structures. And I love language. I love Shakespeare. I love what Chomsky has to say about the effect of language on modern society. And as far as films, I love the work of people like Lynch and like Terry Gilliam. The first film that made me realize I was alive was a little movie back in, I think, 1986 or maybe 84, Time Bandits from Terry Gilliam. All right, here was a story, a dark fable that twisted off with comedy but actually questioned your place in society, that questioned your place in the great whole, and didn't have a happy ending in the end. And here's a kid going, wow, I've been fed all this candy and schlock, and all of a sudden here's something that's making me question my place in the universe. Stories can be told like this. Most of us don't know that. We aren't exposed to that. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, and you understand, but the average person doesn't. And if this series, in its anime style, with its graphic novel content, if it's going to appeal to people in their teens who aren't yet in the choir, who really don't know what direction to take in life, who've only been exposed to a limited amount of information and artistic style and educational or spiritual content. When I was 14 or 15 or 16, if something like this came around, I might have gotten some direction. My parents weren't going to give me any spiritual direction. Back then, you just went to church because you did. You were training to get a job. You're going to school to get A's, so you could go to university to get more A's so you could get a job afterwards. That's what you were meant to do, right? Work, 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 die. And then I realized I wanted something different. Now each chapter has a chapter cover that opens up like a comic book, but again, in a cinematic style. That's why we prefer to call it cinematic literature. Now they range in length from, 10 minutes up to something like, 45 minutes or 40 minutes. And people say, well, how is that interactive? You're not letting them click during the movie. How is that interactive? My justification for that is that, okay, they're sitting in front of their computer, they cannot pause the movie, they cannot fast forward through it. They are forced, if they want to get maximum enjoyment and really reap the rewards of Broken Saints, they are forced in these 10 to 12 minute chunks of each act to completely focus on what is happening. What is that type of focus parallel to? Meditation. We are creating a hypnotic space where people are imagining they are witnessing something, but they aren't hearing voices, they're creating the voices in their head. The music that we use, the sonic landscape, is again very trippy and hypnotic, and the visuals slowly lure them into the climax of each act or chapter. These little meditations, if you have the attention span, and yes, we're in the days of ADD or ADHD, and we say, oh, no one can pay attention to anything for more than 5 minutes anymore. My parents were telling me that when I was 12, okay? There are people out there. There are cultural differences. Yes, I'll agree. Europeans and South Americans and Asians tend to like our series a lot more and stick with it than North Americans do. Why? Because we've been pounded by downloadable chunks of information, quicker, faster, better, harder, now. Right? Well, I'm fighting against the grain a little bit. Is it going to be a mass success? Maybe not. I don't care. Can I touch a few people who are tired of being barraged by the MTV generation? Tired of being barraged by senseless images? Sexuality, purchases, corporate sponsorships? We do call it cinematic literature for a reason. A lot of our movements and fades and shot framings and developments and plot arcs are very cinematic in nature. Fans have said, and this is how I felt when I've read comics, especially late at night or hiding from my parents or sitting outside or I couldn't sleep, especially if it was a really, really good story. I wouldn't just imagine voices in my head. I would create a soundtrack or some sort of feeling or some sort of ambience in my mind to help add to the mood to get me more immersed. And here was a chance to actually do it for real. And I was lucky that the first chunk of music we were able to get access to was, again, a back catalog of my cousins that had never been heard. He had just done these special little pieces for fun. He's like, I never really promoted it. I didn't think anyone would really like it. And I'm just going, oh my God, this is beautiful, powerful music. Let me, gimme, please. So. Do you know what's very interesting is that our fans are 60% female. read through this, if you watch this series, I totally understand why you would think that upon first impression. My artist, Andrew, is a huge fan of Japanese anime. And if you watch any anime, you will see the waifish look and you will see a bit of exposure without it being really sexual. What you will also see in the really good pieces, like Ghost in the Shell, like Evangelion, like Perfect Blue, the Japanese anime art form almost always empowers women and sees them as the center of power, the superior that men are always either trying to impress or the women are saving them. The focus of this story actually are these three wayward, lost men who are brought together and focused and faceted and crystallized by the emotional strength of this woman. And in the end, she becomes the key protagonist. I don't want to give... I really want to like soothe your fears and give away something. Let's just say you'll be very, very happy at the end of the series. Very happy. Because that's the way I view it. Come on, let's be realistic. I think that, and this is not to impress anybody here, who's the real boss socially and who should be? You know, you live longer, you have better left-right brain pathways, better communication skills, you're more resilient, you're more adaptable. Pound for pound, you're actually stronger. You give birth, all right? We set up the whole patriarchy in the first place because we were scared of the truth. I say let's go back and let women rule, man. I'm all about that. And that's part of the thing in the series too, for sure. It's really about tapping back into that feminine side that not only have we lost individually, I think, as males for sure, but we've also lost in Western culture because it's all been about technology, about invasion, about hardness. And it's about these three very rough characters in their own way finding softness, and she guides them there. But at the same time, we also get to see female ferocity. And as anyone will tell you, you know, beware a woman scorned. Because female strength is a formidable thing and it can change the world. And that's something I really wanted to include in the series. Yes? Basically, once I hit about 20, when I moved out to Vancouver and did the whole writing, acting, directing thing, then I got really depressed for a period of time. And one thing, and you can judge me however you want, but one thing about living on the West Coast, specifically in Vancouver, is you move out there, invariably you will start to smoke pot, okay? Because it is very good pot, and it is cheap, and it is everywhere. And so I got hooked on what was being passed around amongst my circle of creative friends. And I got very depressed, and I gave up on work, and I just didn't want to do anything, and I got listless, and I lost all my energy, and had basically a nervous breakdown. Mild one. I sat on the couch and just watched TV for about 3 months and collected social support, and it was horrible. But during that time, when I was rebuilding myself, I went back into the old curiosities that I had about Eastern faiths, but just about other faiths in general. Reread the Bible, read the Quran for the first time, read the Tao Te Ching, Tibetan Book of the Dead. I wanted to really familiarize myself with these spiritual structures because I knew that something was missing in my life that was inherent, and it wasn't going to be provided by a romantic liaison. It wasn't going to be provided by fiscal satisfaction. I was missing something. And it wasn't screaming out to me, and it wasn't singing hallelujah, and it wasn't at the Corner Baptist Church. It wasn't just in this one specific mode or way of being. It was just an air of spiritualism, and my life was missing. So I wanted to research everything I could just for personal reasons. And what was nice was people were saying, well, why don't you write a story about spirit stuff, Brooke, because you're always talking about it. And I didn't want to make it like, I didn't want to make something that was just clubbing people over the head with it, or again, just preaching to the choir who already believed in whatever they believed in. But did I want to include that as a very strong theme in whatever story I wrote that looked at problems of society and economics and politics and communication and technology and gender roles and all the other stuff? Yes. And when you read the series, you'll see that personal responsibility through spirituality is probably the greatest theme of the story. Originally, yes, we wanted to build a community around the story, and we knew that if the story and the presentation was good enough, people would gravitate towards it. And it's just amazed us that it's grown the way it has, and that they're so passionate, and from so many different age groups and demographics and locations around the world. And they're so passionate about what they believe in, and they want to share it, and they rant about, you know, philosophy and life and religion and everything else, and that's great. And I don't want to lose that. So we hadn't originally planned on, okay, as soon as it's done, we're going to do X, Y, or Z to keep them there. But yes, we are currently planning ways for how it finishes, how it continues from there, and how we can also create an actual space for these people that's not just about Broken Saints, but a space where these people feel safe, and something for them that they basically get to manage themselves. So if I'm getting you correctly, it's like if I'm being a cult leader and everyone said, oh yeah, we're drinking your Kool-Aid, would this still have validity? If it's a good story, I might be assuming, but if it's a good story, it wouldn't matter. You're just reinforcing something that's already there. That's what archetypal stories do. They reinforce something that you might already believe in, but it helps you get through the day. Because, hey, I might be really zealous right now, but I'll have my weak moments too, and I'll be inspired by other people's work. That's basically, again, preaching to the choir. I already know what they're saying, and I gravitate towards it, and my thinking's parallel or in agreement with it. But it helps. Like any good story, you see something that touches you, and you're like, this feels like a part of my life. This makes sense to me. And the reason I wanted to do it is because there aren't enough stories like this in the mainstream. In 1999, like I said, I was very happy to see, mainstream studios releasing films that challenged reality, because people weren't doing that. We can look at modern media today and watch the crap music videos and the crap TV shows, and the majority of it's crap. My friend Rex here will agree with me on the whole Buffy thing, because there's a reason it got a cult following around the show. It was speaking not only to teens but to adults in so many layers that people could relate to it and felt a sense of belonging and felt a sense of overcoming their own personal demons through this mythology that had been created by the series. I might be taking it like a step further or more intensely or to a more focused mindset, but it's the same thing, right? A series Bible and a real sense of a place somewhere where you've gone that's very much like your own. It's set in the real world. All the technology that we cover in the series is now. The culmination, what's going to happen in the climax, is possible and world-changing. And I certainly hope that some smart kid, after seeing it, tries it. Usually, majority, so the best way possible, the greatest old-fashioned way of finding something, word of mouth. They tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and they tell two friends. Otherwise, it's featured on portal sites like Macromedia, who supports Flash, or Apple mentioned it once. You've got reviews in major magazines. You've got sites like Wired.com, MP4, which is a branch off of Vivendi. Some major sites will link us, or fan sites will link us, or someone's blog might mention us and say, hey, here's a kind of funky thing, check it out, and you just get this growing viral campaign. You brought it up, so I'll tell the quick story. Yeah, we've had a production partner in LA who's trying to help us develop this into something we have control of as either an animated or a live action series. That's interesting. If we can keep total control over the copyright, that's great. I went down for a meeting a couple of months back, and there was an investor who was very, very interested. An investor from CCTV4, Communist China TV4, who said, we'd like to help you develop this into a series. And after a series of meetings, the coordinator came and basically put a check for $2.5 million on the table and says, we buy copyright. And I went, excuse me? We buy copyright. And I went, and I leave. And yeah, my young partners who have been raised in a little bit of affluence in North Vancouver, Canada, were like, you said no? And I said, yeah, I had to. Imagine the karmic recurrences of doing all this for free and then selling it off and having it become, marketed toys and underground black market goods in the Pacific Rim. That would be kind of bad, wouldn't it? You wonder how I reject it? I was raised by parents who are obsessed with money. I love them and all, but our only conversations are about T-bills and stocks and savings, and have only ever been about those things. And these are all the things I really wanted to talk about and learn about. Then I moved to Vancouver, and there's a bit of a counterculture there, to be sure, like you said, the Adbusters and the kind of, Clackwad sound, the protest vibe in the West. But primarily, no way. That's the problem. Everything there is trying to be like LA, or a squashed together version of LA, San Francisco, Seattle. And so it's Hollywood North, and you've got people getting, every fourth person is getting some sort of plastic surgery It's all based on status and money. People are incredibly vain and shallow there. They reflect the aesthetic. I know this. People who live there know this, and they joke about it. The only culture in Vancouver is in the yogurt. And so I wasn't gonna just sit back and let it happen, man. Whoa, whatever. Ear. Right? We're in Ontario. I actually came just north of Toronto, an hour north in a town called Sutton, on Lake Simcoe. Lake Simcoe. Yeah, small town. That was where I was raised during high school. Still exposed to, and I loved the media. I went to the movies every weekend. I wanted to go to the big city. I wanted the big fashionable prizes. I wanted to matter, because TV was telling me I could matter if I had cool clothes, and if I had a good-looking girlfriend, and if I drove the coolest car, then I'd matter, then I'd be okay. But before that, I was raised in a tiny fishing village in Nova Scotia on the East Coast with really good people, and I didn't appreciate them as much, and I do now. Basically, there are chapters that totally focus on driving the story forward, and it's purely about dialogue between the characters or internal monologue. And there are others that are definitely more visual and are there to create this kind of hypnotic trip feeling. We like to take people on that ride. I don't think you can do all of one or the other, and it just happens to work out. The story lends itself to that. It totally makes sense. I want to say yes and give a nice rosy impression. I've always been, and I don't wear this badge with pride, I've always been a little bit of a lone wolf. I went to Flash Forward 2 years ago when we were first nominated, and I just didn't seem to mesh with everyone there talking about, oh, our new action script, oh, this, hey, oh, high five, let's pay a whole bunch of hundreds of dollars, and we're doing our thing, and yeah, Flash rules, Flash rules. I'm like, okay, this isn't me. I'm not about this. I just want to talk about some issues, man. I just want some passion. It's not about the tools. It's about what you have to say with the tools. But moments like this, the reason I'm here is because I came to a discussion on using digital tools to tell stories with news and with journalism back in February at the University of Minnesota, and met some good people. And that gave me hope. This city is excellent. What a great counterculture vibe, and passionate people who are educated and want to say stuff and know what the media is trying to do to them and is trying to skew it, trying to co-opt it for themselves, trying to be guerrilla with it. And yeah, that gives me hope. I just don't feel like I have a lot necessarily in my community or in the Flash community, so to speak. But I think that online communication, this tool, this incredibly powerful tool, does have the potential, if enough artists get together and they have similar philosophies, to really make a difference. But we have to do it soon before, like every other medium, it gets co-opted for commercial concerns. Because when you think online, the average human being right now thinks shopping and porn. And that's the problem with all mediums, right? Not shopping and porn, but the idea that it gets co-opted and you think of it in a certain light. You think of movies when someone says film. Sure, I'd love to say yes, Aronofsky or Lynch or Gilliam or whoever. But you think summer blockbuster. When someone says film, you initially think, oh yeah, movie's out. When you think book, it's like, the Idiot's Guide to whatever. Or you think mainstream. You think music, you think Britney Spears. You don't want to, but that's the first thing that comes to mind because that's what's thrown down your throat every day. And so when you think online, unfortunately, it's been tainted. And I'm hoping that enough people get together and try to turn it back to something pure. And I guess that's everything. Thank you very much for coming.